Okay, so it is December 11th, 2024. Wednesday night, and I can definitely tell a flare-up is coming. Definitely tell. So I was a little bit productive during lunch. I did get some books cleaned up and put in a tote, and some games cleaned up and put in a tote. So I wanted to make an effort to talk about the 2008 abuse by proxy scam. What did he do in 2008? And why do I believe he did it? So in 2008, he was out of town for an alleged new kind of business meeting. And I was in the 8th month of a high-risk pregnancy. Very, very high-risk pregnancy. My obstetrician, in fact, had said that I should take a leave from work and stop working and basically turn to bed rest because it was a very high-risk pregnancy, and there were problems, a host of problems and risks. And when the obstetrician suggested that, he, the sociopath, looked the obstetrician dead in the eye and said, "Are you going to pay her bills?" It was pretty shocking, really. It was in the 8th month of that pregnancy that he, the sociopath, really whipped off those gloves and came out of the facade and was just starting to reveal what he was. But I did not understand it at the time. I believed that because his other business had failed and there were money problems, that he was just stressed out. I did not understand the reality of what was going on. So after that doctor's appointment, obviously, I was in the 8th month of the pregnancy. He, the sociopath, got on a plane and flew to another state for an alleged business meeting for a new business. And I just hemorrhaged out. It was nothing I did. I didn't do anything to cause it. Didn't have any clue it was going to happen. I just went to bed that night after work, got up to go to the restroom, and the toilet filled with blood. That was the first I had any clue. I was literally laying in bed, sleeping, had to get up to go to the bathroom, and surprise! It was pretty shocking, and it was pretty terrifying. Obviously, I called the doctor. I called the sociopath, who I didn't know was a sociopath yet. Doctor told me to drive to the hospital. So that's what I did. I packed up my one child who was almost a year old at the time, and I drove myself to the hospital. I was aiming to meet with the sociopath's family member so that they could take the almost 1 year old, and then I could go in the hospital and seek medical care. And a lot of bizarre things happened in the parking lot. Well, a few bizarre things happened in the parking lot. Two nurses came out and they were just acting weird. And I'll get into the details of that probably another time because I don't want this video to be 5 hours long. Not that I have that much memory space on this device. But looking back on it, I strongly suspect that he, the sociopath, had been calling the hospital and telling lies already. And I had, of course, no idea that that was happening. I would never have suspected that could happen. It would have never entered into my mind. In short, a couple weird things. When his family member arrived to take my almost 1 year old, the nurses looked completely freaked out, like completely white as ghost, eyes huge. And they asked me if I trust this person. A family member of his, the sociopath, drove up in a very nice vehicle, meticulously kept, high-end vehicle, and, was a very normal-looking person. So in retrospect, yeah, that's really bizarre. I had told them I was waiting for the family member to come get my other child because I didn't want to lift the car seat or anything with any weight because, I was bleeding out. I didn't think lifting was a good idea. So anyway, so after my child was taken by the family member to take care of my child, I went into the hospital and I was indeed bleeding out. I was examined. They contacted my doctor. They injected me with stuff to stop the labor, and they injected me later with a steroid that was supposed to mature the lungs of the fetus. And the stuff they injected me to stop the labor causes your heart to race. So I was freaking out a little bit about that. And later it became known that I have two kinds of heart arrhythmia and a heart murmur. So yeah, it probably was pretty freaky to be inside my body while that was going on. Nobody warned me that it would cause heart palpitations and, with arrhythmia, it caused some major stuff. But I didn't cuss, I didn't scream, I didn't threaten anybody, I didn't do anything crazy. I was just hyperventilating a little bit. And I was worried. And of course I was hyperventilating. I have two types of heart arrhythmia and a heart murmur. You give me a shot that makes my heart go wackadoodle, and yeah, that's mix that with heart arrhythmia, two types. See what happens. At a certain point, they decided to just send me home. So, as pregnant people do, I had to go to the restroom. So I went to the restroom and filled up the potty with blood again because, when I got up and I walked, gravity, right? And then you go to urinate, and gravity will cause the blood to stream out because of gravity, and yeah, and then, going to the restroom and everything. So I notified the nurse of this. They looked and they decided I should stay in the hospital. I think at this time he, the sociopath, was calling the hospital and telling them all kinds of lies already. I think he had started before I ever even got there. He was supposed to be trying to get on a plane to come to the hospital. And what I was never told is there was some kind of hurricane weather or something going on, and all the flights were closed, and he couldn't get on a plane, allegedly. Allegedly. So I was told, I was told by medical staff that they were going to do a C-section and that it was too early, and that's why I needed the injections of the steroid to mature the lungs. So I told that to the sociopath. And so allegedly he was trying more to get on a plane and return for that event. After enough hours, I decided to go home and get some things because I had not brought any things. You know, normally you bring an overnight bag. You know, I didn't bring anything like that. And one of the nurses kept telling me that I could go. I just had to sign a form releasing the hospital from any liability, but then she kept stepping in front of me like it was dodgeball or something, and she actually physically wouldn't let me go. So I couldn't leave. And that was some pretty bizarre behavior. But at the time, I was too naive to figure that out. I just thought she was being a little weird, but I didn't really understand it, didn't understand the relevance. So I laid back down in the bed, and later I got a room and I was put in a room, and the hospital had this security guard standing in the room constantly, or there were nurses in the room constantly, and that was really weird. And this went on and on late into the night, into the wee hours of the morning, and eventually he, the sociopath, arrived, and he kept going out in the hallway and talking to the nurses and stuff, and I didn't have any idea what he was talking to them about. I do know that when he arrived, he was enraged. He was enraged because I wasn't having an immediate C-section, and I thought it was a good thing that I wasn't having an immediate C-section because it was too early, but he was enraged that I had wasted his time having him come over, fly back and all of this stuff, and they weren't even doing the C-section right then and there. The fact they were literally giving me steroid injections to mature the lungs and all of this was going on did not ease his rage at all. The fact that I was really bleeding out did not ease his rage at all. He was enraged. He was civil. He was civil towards me, but he was enraged. And he kept going out in the hall. And I didn't really know what he was doing out there, to be honest, but I found out he was talking to the nurses later. And later, I also found out he was lying nonstop to the nurses and doctors and medical staff and who knows who else. So they wouldn't let me go home. If I even got up and went to the door to look where my sociopath partner was, um, if I opened the door to peek out to find him, the security guard would grab his weapon and come to the door. It was really bizarre. But I was still too stupid. I was still too stupid to figure it out. I didn't panic or anything. I was just too dumb, to be honest, too naive, too clueless. So somewhere around the wee hours of the morning, something like that, a social worker came in the room. And the social worker asked me about, being suicidal and thinking I'm going to have an animal baby. Like, we're talking about a furry, four-legged, which I at no point in time had said to anybody ever. I mean, ever. And I found out later, much later, that the sociopath had been telling them that I was suicidal and I, thought I was going to have an animal baby. It's like, honestly, if I would have thought I was going to have a four-legged furry animal baby, I think an early C-section would be a really good idea. Because that's not that that just needs to go to science. That just needs to go to science. Um, I never, ever, ever said anything remotely indicating that I thought any such thing. And I had not been suicidal. It's kind of like when I walked in on him telling his sister that I was so distraught over a kind of cancer that the doctor had diagnosed me with, and the doctor had never diagnosed me with that cancer because it had never happened. And I wasn't distraught, and I wasn't even thinking about cancer. Cancer wouldn't have even entered my mind, much less been the farthest thing from my mind. It wouldn't have entered my mind at that point in time as anything remotely possible. So it was just him smear campaigning me, trying to line up his his dumb puppets to do whatever he wanted them to do. And that's what he was doing, telling them all these stories. So, of course, I told the social worker that none of that was true, and I had no idea where that was coming from, and that was an honest statement. And I had hard evidence of that at one time. And like almost a year later, that social worker testified in mental health court. Not mental health court, it's like mental health provider complaint court. That social worker testified that indeed I had never said anything to confirm any of those statements or stories at all, and that he was not going to do anything, but that my partner, i.e., the sociopath, kept telling him these things, and that's why he did what he did. He testified in mental health provider complaint court saying that. Because guess what? I never said any of that crazy stuff. I never thought any of that crazy stuff. I never had dreams of any of that crazy stuff. But he, the sociopath, sure did. It was all in his head, and he told him these stories and created this whole character of me that was never me, of behaviors and statements that I never did, of a history that was never me, of current life that was never me, this whole mock up of me. Anyway, so the social worker laughed after I told him no, no, no. And a while later, a psychiatrist came in, and the psychiatrist came in and said, so you're going to kill yourself or you're going to commit suicide, and you believe that you're going to have an animal baby. And I said, no, that's not true. I never said that. And then he just repeated, so you were going to commit suicide and you're going to have an animal baby. And I said, no, that's not true. And I think he repeated it. He just repeated it. Like he just said it. He just repeated it again. So, so you are going to kill yourself and you're going to have an animal baby. That's what you said, right? And I just said, no. And please leave the room and don't come back until you get the reality straight or get the facts straight or something like that. So he was so angry. He was so angry. The psychiatrist was enraged. And he literally huffed, grabbed his file, and stormed out of the room. I never saw him again. So At this point, there's still always a nurse in the room. The security guard is out in the hallway at the door. And I'm starting to figure out something's whack. Something's really wrong here. And I'm starting to get anxiety. I'm starting to get scared, like seriously scared. And the anxiety and the fear are building because something's really wrong. And, I had conversation, a little bit of conversation with the nurse watchers. They were in the room and found out that I was on a suicide watch. And I said a few sarcastic things, which were just stupid, and obviously were sarcastic. And I said they were sarcastic because the whole thing was just crazy. Like, I never said those things. Like, the social worker testified in mental health provider complaint court later that I never said those things, that I'd never said anything in his ear range, and I never did anything in his sight, and he was not going to do anything. But my spouse at the time kept telling him those things, and that's why he did it. So I was not saying those things. Or that social worker would have said in the complaint court, I'd said it and he heard me say it, but that's not what he said. So at a certain point, the next day, the next night, whenever it was, I think it was still in the wee hours of the morning. I mean, I was in a room. I was in the dark anyway. Um, there was this meeting, and my spouse, the sociopath, and my OBGYN and some doctors and whatever, nurses, they all went into a meeting about me, and it was not in my room. And, you know, I said to, and I didn't even know, they didn't even tell me there was going to be a meeting, but they went to this meeting. And I asked the nurse that was watching me at the time, where did my, sociopath go? I didn't say sociopath at the time. And she said, oh, he went to a meeting. And I said, a meeting? I should have a right to attend that meeting. I want to attend that meeting. Where's the meeting? I want to be in there. I want to speak up too. And she said, you're right. You should be able to, go to the meeting as well because it's about your medical care. And so she, went and checked at the door and whatever. They had a change of the guard. And then later she came back and she said that she's sorry, but I can't go. And then, I mean, like, I'd had this growing fear and panic, and then I just knew. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I had no idea exactly what was going to happen, but I knew that I was in a lot of danger, and the child I was carrying was in a lot of danger. Because I was hemorrhaging in a high-risk pregnancy, 8 months pregnant. This was no joke. This was no joke. Something was really wrong physically with me that was endangering myself and the baby. So eventually they came back from the meeting, all of them, and they all, stood in the room around my bed, and they all said that, they'd had the meeting and that they decided that they needed to, involuntarily commit me to the cuckoo bin. And that's what they had done. They had done it already. And that I would be transported to the cuckoo bin in a very short time period. I don't remember the time they said. But they made it sound like it was pretty much going to be immediate, right? And I was like, no, I'm bleeding out, I'm in medical danger. The baby's in medical danger. This is not good. No. In addition, I never said any of those things or did any of those things. And I demanded, evaluation and whatever. And they just denied me all that. And they said, yes, that's what's going to happen. We've already set it up. So again, there's a guard at the door, there's a nurse in the room all the time, and I could not escape. They didn't let me out of the room for any reason at all. Like I couldn't walk in the hall or anything. Could not leave the room for any reason. And then there was this delay of like days for me to be transported to the cuckoo bin. And there I am, bleeding out, knowing, sensing that this baby is in danger. I'm in danger because I keep bleeding out. And I need to basically, if there's no way to escape, I need to basically get to the cuckoo bin and clear myself and get out. The obstetrician did come in and apologize, and at one point he agreed to override the order because he had the authority to override the order. But then he later came in and said he couldn't because his attorney told him that if he did that and if anything happened, right, just in case, if anything happened, then he would be in trouble for it. Stupidest. Like, what a coward. What a coward. I lost all trust and all respect for doctors at that point. For, most doctors at that point, they're cowards. They're just, it's ridiculous. So anyway, so days passed, and I still wasn't being transported to the cuckoo bin. And I had to get it done and get evaluated because, I kept bleeding out. I was constantly hemorrhaging. The hemorrhaging never stopped. And it was actually getting worse and worse and worse as the days went by. And trying to take the baby out early to, send me to the cuckoo bin wasn't the solution either. The solution was to get through the cuckoo bin, get out of the cuckoo bin, and be able to go get an ultrasound with this top ultrasound expert that I had been under the care of that was not a part of this. Find out what was going on and try to mitigate whatever damage was going on. But I had to get through the cuckoo bin and out first in order to do that because there was, again, no escape. So I actually had to call the cuckoo bin and the police and everything else to arrange a transport. And after I did that, because the hospital had been failing, were constantly trying to get me shipped off, but they had been failing. Another word on incompetence, I guess. And anyway, so an ambulance came to transport me to the cuckoo bin, and which later sent me a bill of thousands of dollars for the ambulance ride. Just insanity. Thousands of dollars worth of a bill for the ambulance ride to the cuckoo bin. I got into the cuckoo bin, and it was going into a holiday. It was a holiday weekend, and then the Monday or whatever was a holiday. So, in other words, there was a delay in getting an evaluation of any kind. And every single day, I, I literally bled out more. I bled out, I just hemorrhaged more and more and more. I was using rolls of toilet paper to turn into an extra pad and having to change it every hour or so because it was just hemorrhaging. My body. My body was just hemorrhaging. And I was having a lot of contractions too. And I was in the cuckoo bin for like 2 weeks of time before I could finally get a court ordered hearing regarding being released. And at that point, I was released without any court ordered treatment. I was never given psychiatric medications. I never did anything in there that was crazy. Um, when I was evaluated, all I could do is like recount the details of the story and go into this long, drawn out recollection of what had happened to get me there because I had no idea at the time about the sociopath and what he had done. I didn't know. Now the attorney that represented me to get me freed, she told me everything traces back to him. She kept telling me that, and I didn't believe her because I was loyal and I didn't believe her, but it turned out to be she was correct. Everything traced back to the sociopath, who I didn't know was a sociopath at the time. Anyway, the only reason I was even in there that long was as a safety precaution because there was so much liability to let me go if anything happened because I was in the third trimester pregnant. But while I was in the cuckoo bin, I was in hard labor and I was hemorrhaging out severely 24/7 the whole time. I was also assaulted numerous times. Numerous times I was assaulted. Um, the walls within there, not in the living room area, the visiting room, the living room area where people could see you during the day, they cleaned it with a bleach solution first thing in the morning and at night. But like if you went down the hallways into the bedrooms and into the bathrooms and places like that, these patients were smearing their feces all over the walls, all over like the bathroom, all over the countertop was smeared with feces and urine and snot. The toilets were smeared with feces and urine and like droplets of blood, and there was snot everywhere. They would dribble urine and feces all over the floor, like it would just come dribbling out of their pants. Um, they would come in, wander into your room, and they would get your toothbrush and spit on it, or blow their snot on there, or put feces on your toothbrush and things like that. I mean, it was disgusting. It was disgusting. I was taken to the medical a number of times when I was there, and they would examine me, which I didn't want because every time they examined me, I would bleed out even more. And I was just already literally every hour or 2 hours, I would have to change the sanitary napkin. And on top of the sanitary napkin, I was usually like a half roll of toilet paper to a roll of toilet paper, turn that into a big thick pad and put it on top of the sanitary napkin. And I was having to change that every hour, hour and a half. And every time I got examined, it would be way more bleeding. And that bleeding was not good. That bleeding was not what was supposed to be happening. And then I was contracting severely. And on the ride in the cuckoo bus to the court before I was released, same thing. I was just bleeding. It's like, I think if you were like urinating, you're having a pretty good stream of urine, but it was blood. It was pretty much like, it was like that a lot. And if it was less, it was like a trickle of urine, but it was just constant 24/7. So when I was driven in the bus to go to the cuckoo hearing, where I ultimately was released, and the case was dismissed. The case was dismissed. And I was released, still pregnant, which I spoke to a director of the hospital later, and he said, well, it's obvious that you weren't a danger and you weren't mentally ill because that's a really high risk time to release somebody, and there's no way you would have been released. Still pregnant, but I was, because guess what? I wasn't crazy. So finally, I was released after about 2 weeks. And again, the case was dismissed. It was dismissed. It was dismissed. There was no medications given to me at any time. There was no suggestions that I should take medication. There was not even a suggestion I take medication. There was no sign I needed medication. Um, Nothing. And so the sociopath drove me, quote unquote, home. And on the drive home, he stopped at this fancy cupcake place I'll never forget, in a fancy area of town. And he got a cupcake for me, a cupcake for an older son he has with a previous wife, and he got a cupcake for himself, and I don't remember if he got a cupcake for my not yet 1 year old because he wasn't at the house yet when I came home. And we got the cupcakes, one cupcake for each of us, and we got back in his car, and he said something about how now I knew how, like, to behave myself, because if I didn't behave myself, I knew what would happen. And he said this with this arrogant, haughty, cold, callous, cunning tone, and the look in his eyes and his face, and my stomach just dropped. And remember, my attorney who helped me get out of that situation kept telling me it traces back to him, it traces back to him, and I hadn't believed her. And then when he said that, after we got in the car after getting the cupcakes, then it kind of like hit me, like, what if she was right? What if he lied and caused all this to happen and almost caused me and the baby to get killed? So we drove to the house. He drove to the house. I was a passenger. And when we got to the house, I had lost appetite for the cupcake, obviously, after hearing what he said. I asked him if I could go to the condo to go swimming or water the plants or whatever I said. I think I said water the plants. And he wasn't happy about it. And he said, said something. I don't remember exactly what he said, but something like, "You're kidding. Are you sure? Are you sure about that?" Or something like that. And I said, "Yes, I need to go water the plants." I really think it was water the plants that I said, because I just had to get away. I just had to get away because I was processing the things I just mentioned. And so he let me go, and I got in my car and I drove there, and all the plants were dead. I had this beautiful, beautiful garden of all of these plants and all of these flowers that were in the patio yard. I mean, back then, the patio yard was decked out. It was so beautiful. There was this gorgeous glass patio table and these really cool patio chairs, two of them out there, and then the whole thing was these gorgeous flowers. They were all dead because this had happened in the summer and they hadn't been watered the whole time I was in the medical hospital, and then the whole time I was in the cuckoo bin, they hadn't been watered. And it was a super hot, hot time of the summer. So they were all dead. I had spent so much money on those beautiful plants and so much time. I mean, it was such a peaceful, like a haven with all those flowers. And then I had also lost my job as a no call, no show because I got sent to the cuckoo bin. So I just had like a few $100s, like a partial paycheck that they deposited or whatever. But I wasn't going to be getting any more money, and there wasn't any groceries. There wasn't any groceries, and I'd lost so much weight when I was in the cuckoo bin because the food was inedible. And when you go to eat food, this is when visitors don't come in. And in the morning, the people come out of their rooms and they're all pissing on the ground and crapping on the ground as they're walking. And then they all shuffle to the tables and they're all half comatose and they're all, blowing their snot, on the tables and everything else. I was just, that's how meal times were. The meals themselves were beyond grotesque, inedible. I mean, and I'll almost eat wet dog food. I mean, I'm not a picky eater. This stuff was bad, and the ambiance was just disgusting and disease filled. In fact, I was actually put in a room for almost the first week with somebody that had tuberculosis. one of my roommates had tuberculosis, active tuberculosis, and I was in a room with that person for like a week. It's just bad environment. So anyway, back to the condo. So we didn't have any groceries at the house. And one of the things my obstetrician had been worried about was, I'm always very thin and I was anemic. And, I normally have medical issues. So, I was hoping that the groceries I had in the fridge and freezer at the condo would be okay in the fridge or the freezer, right? And I opened up, but the power had gone out while I was locked up. And so once I found out the power had gone out too, and I, of course, hadn't been around to take care of the problem and pay the bill, so the power had gone out. Um, and then I had to empty out hundreds of dollars of food, really good food. I had to empty out the freezer because it was all in there, rotting, stinking to high heaven. All the frozen food had gone bad. Oh, it was so disgusting. And I had to empty it out and get in trash bags and, haul it out to the trash and throw it away. So there wasn't any food. And there really wasn't any really groceries at the house to speak of. And I didn't really have any money because, no more job. And at this point, I'm contracting and pouring out blood. And primarily, I also went to the condo to decompress from what he had said after we got the cupcakes, because I was really starting to suspect. And that was really a difficult thing to handle. So, anyway, after doing all of that, I returned to the house and just tried to take it easy, tried to relax because I was still bleeding out nonstop. And then the very next night, he got on a plane and left to go out of state for another one of these alleged business meetings. That was BS. But he did. He got on a plane, he left. And had been bleeding out nonstop, and I tried to get him not to leave, but he insisted on leaving. So, needless to say, I did go to the store that day, and I got, I was able to get like a pack of bacon and I don't know, maybe some bread or something. I didn't have very much money because I hadn't worked a whole 2 weeks before all this started. So there wasn't very much money deposited in my account. And I didn't really even get to cook it or eat it or anything because the contractions got a lot worse, really, really extreme. I'd also rented some Redbox movies, that's right. So I was going to watch these Redbox movies and take it easy. And Sociopath was gone. He was out of state. And the contractions hit really, really bad. I mean, I was basically laying on the couch with a Redbox movie in, wanting to watch this Redbox movie, and these contractions just kept going and going and going and getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I was going, oh my gosh. So I called my doctor and he said, drive to the hospital. I called the sociopath, and told him I had to go to the hospital. So I drove myself to a hospital, to same hospital chain. It was the same hospital chain, which was a mistake, but it was farther away. So it was like a 30-minute drive instead of the 5-minute drive to the closer hospital that had done that the first time. And but it was still in the same hospital chain. It was a sister hospital. And so they did the C-section. They immediately incinerated the placenta and claim it was fine, which I don't believe. I think they covered something up because you can't be bleeding that way and have a normal placenta. Something was wrong. It's obvious. And then immediately when I got back into the recovery room after the C-section, the baby went to the NICU. The baby was in the NICU for 2 weeks. not a surprise considering that you're not supposed to be just bleeding out and getting assaulted and crawling around in feces, urine, snot, and blood, and getting assaulted some more, and having people spit and rub feces on your toothbrush, and being put in a room with someone who is, has tuberculosis for a week. And these are not this is not prenatal care. This is not prenatal care. This is like trying to kill the mother and baby. That's what this is trying to do. So the baby went to the NICU for 2 weeks, and I got a spinal headache severely because of the injection they give you in your back when they do a C-section. When it leaks spinal fluid out, you get severe spinal headaches. And it's like a migraine times a billion trillion. And a migraine, the worst migraine in the world, doesn't even compare. So I couldn't go see the baby or anything because of the spinal headache was just unrelenting the whole time I was there. And they couldn't do the blood patch because apparently my insurance wouldn't cover it. They can actually do a blood patch in your back where they stuck you, but insurance wouldn't cover it. So they didn't do a blood patch to stop the spinal headache. And anyway, that hospital immediately, the minute I was in the recovery room, they were trying to get me back in the cuckoo bin, touting the same BS. Even though I had definitely not said anything or done anything that was wrong or crazy or anything, I found out later because I talked to the psychiatrist at the cuckoo bin who had been one of the psychiatrists to evaluate me. And she told me she knew about it. Yes, she knew that they tried to send me there again. And she and the other doctor blocked it. They blocked it because they didn't think I needed to be there. I swear to God. She said that. I have proof of it somewhere, unless I lost that proof when the condo went into foreclosure without my knowledge, without any warning. It's possible I lost the proof when that happened, but I had proof of that she said that. I have proof of everything except for what got lost when the condo went through foreclosure without me being warned. Um, so anyway, so this medical hospital that had just done a C-section wanted to do a psychiatric evaluation on me. And he, the sociopath, got on a plane. He flew back after the C-section was done, went to see the baby in the NICU, then went to see me, and was probably talking to the nurses and filling their ears up with lies. That could have been why they restarted the whole thing as well, because I never said or did anything bizarre at all. The only bizarre thing was I couldn't walk around and whatnot and go to the NICU to see the baby because I had the worst spinal headache ever. But as medical professionals, you would think they would understand that, but I'm not so sure they understood that, because the minute you get slandered like that, the rules that apply to other people, they don't apply to you. So another person could get compassion and treatment for having a spinal headache, but you will get treated like you're just full of nonsense and you just need to suck it up. It's a whole different world that you step into that you don't even realize what's happening. You're just being treated really awful. So anyway, he, the sociopath, was threatening to leave me and never talk to me again and take the kids away if I spoke to the social worker. I was being told if I didn't speak to the social worker, they were going to get me to the cuckoo bin. But if I spoke to the social worker, they told me, and he decided everything was fine, then they would just let it go and everything would be fine. So I opted to speak to the social worker. I did. This social worker took what I said and what he witnessed talking to me and looking at me. He took that and he did not try to commit me. However, the hospital called CPS. So when the sociopath drove me home, and the baby stayed in the NICU for 2 weeks, so we drove home without the baby. When the sociopath drove me home, a CPS caseworker was waiting in the driveway because the hospital called CPS. Not on the sociopath, but on me. Based upon the lies that the sociopath had said at the first hospital before I was put in the cuckoo bin, and I got released from the cuckoo bin. The case was dismissed. There was no court-ordered treatment. I'd never been given any psychiatric drugs. The psychiatrist there had blocked me from being returned to the cuckoo bin because they did not believe I belonged there, but the medical hospital still called CPS. And so we had to talk to CPS right after I had a C-section, and, while I had a spinal headache, and my older son had his first birthday while I was in the cuckoo bin as well. Um, was it the first birthday? Yeah, it was the first birthday. He had his first birthday. So I didn't get a birthday party for my other child, which just destroyed me. And there was no way to get that first birthday party back. I mean, the time was gone. And the sociopath had dropped my other child off with the family members again. So, but when they brought my other child home, then immediately the sociopath was battering my other child. And that's when the battering of my child, who was just barely over, he was just 10 days, about 10 days past his first birthday party, and he was being beaten like an adult every night, every night. And there's a lot going on with that, but he was beating my child like an adult, like just battering him for getting out of bed at night, battering him if he whimpered or cried at night, battering him if he didn't, look and act respectful enough, battering him if he dropped a sippy cup, battering him if he dropped a piece of food on the floor. It was just constant. And when I tried to intervene, the sociopath would say to me, "Go ahead, call the police. Go ahead, call the police. I'll just tell them that you were in the mental hospital and that you're depressed and suicidal and crazy. So go ahead, call the police." That's what he would say. And then he would keep battering my child that was about 10 days beyond being 1 year old. And that's how it started. So that was the first abuse by proxy scam that he pulled off in 2008. In 2008. The next abuse by proxy scam he pulled off in 2012. And when I got back home after that one, he was battering both children severely. And he had both children in the shower with him playing with his willy as he giggled. Touching his willy, slapping his willy, kind of grabbing and tugging his willy, poking his willy, stroking his willy, and kind of, not like a sophisticated stroking, but like a grab yank stroke. And the kids were giggling and he was giggling. And he was like encouraging them to play with his willy in the shower. And he was battering both of them severely. And that continued. And I kept trying to stop it, and I kept trying to intervene, but he would just threaten to call the police and have me arrested again. And he can do that with lies. So, two abuse by proxy scams, 2008 and 2012, covered in this video. Again, I do know the proper terms. I do know all the DSM terms. I do know all of that language, but I've just given up on that language because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to the people in power that could help people like me and my kids. My kids now beyond help. It doesn't matter. They don't care. So that's what happened. Two abuse by proxy scams, 2008, 2012. And I do have an absolute plan to do what I'm going to do. It's not violent. It's not just to clarify, since I know the sociopath is going to end up stalking this channel sooner or later, no, I'm not going to come visit him. No, I'm not going to come visit the kids. No, I'm not going to come visit anyone else. No, I'm not going to, there's not going to be any weapons involved. No, no, I never said there was. No, as usual, no. That won't stop him from lying about it and trying to create another abuse by proxy scam. But that's just how it is. Again, it is December 11th, 2024, Wednesday night after work. Thank you so much for listening. Whoever listens, whenever you listen, over and out.